Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Shortcuts Online Breakfast. Very glad to see everyone joining. And as you are, I will a little bit introduce the shortcut and today's event. So, the shortcut, if you are joining us for the first time, we are an impact driven nonprofit organization dedicated to career transformation here in Finland. We help people find a meaningful job or start their own business. So today we are going to be talking more about entrepreneurship related question, and it is growing your business with a podcast. And our guest today is Pia Blomqvist, CEO and founder of Castaway agency. Welcome, Pia.
Thank you. Thank you. Glad to be here.
Glad to have you. And for my very first question to you, I want to ask you to introduce yourself and a little bit about your background. And meanwhile, everyone in the chat can also a little bit introduce themselves and where they are joining us from, and start posting questions for Pia in the chat also. Yes, Pia, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. So, hi everyone. I'm really happy to be here. My name is Pia Blomqvist. I also go by Pippi. So, whichever you prefer is fine. I am soon to be 25 years old. I'm home from a small town in southern Finland called Sibbo, and I'm actually finishing my master's degree at Hanken School of Economics at the moment. So that is shortly who I am. Like Ekaterina already mentioned, I am the CEO and co-founder of Castaway agency, which I founded last year. So we celebrated our 1 year anniversary just a month back with my co-founder Matilda Backman. Um, a little bit about how and why I became an entrepreneur is actually quite a bit of a funny story. So Matilda and I go back a couple of years. We both did our bachelor degrees in Turku. So we studied there together, did not know each other too well at the time, but then we both came to study to Hanken at the same time and got to know each other a little better, got to the same friend group and started working out together as well. And one day at the gym, we were lifting weights and then just started talking about some of our favorite podcasts. And we came up with that. Hey, I don't think we have, you know, a podcasting community of sorts in Helsinki. So we started talking about, the available services that we have and the providers and everything. And we concluded that hey, this would be a really fun thing to start up. Um, And so when I came home from the gym, I was in contact with a couple of people asking about their experience in the business. And then everything just sort of went on from there. So um, we started doing our research and we had the opportunity to be a part of accelerators, which really helped us sort of get started. And we were really excited to reach out to our first customers and do our first sort of pro bono cases, just to test out our idea and see how everything works, and just start looking out for business opportunities and testing the idea of sorts. Um, so that is sort of how I became an entrepreneur. But more if I go into the why, it's actually always been quite natural to me. So my father is an entrepreneur, so I'm familiar with that concept all the way from since I was a baby. So it's really nothing new, and I've been a part of the startup community for years now through voluntary work. I was part of the Honkan Entrepreneurs Society as co-president and vice president in Start Helsinki as well. So I've been um, planting my seeds in the startup ecosystem in Helsinki, and now I'm actually writing my thesis about gendered practices and masculinities in the startup ecosystem in Helsinki. So that sort of it came naturally to me.
That's quite a topic. Very interesting to hear. I also studied at Turku. I studied in Turku School of Economics, but for masters, so I didn't know it before this. Yeah, and so we are now we have started this Spark Academy in March. That is now like first module entrepreneurship is now over this week, and it is for non-binary people and women, and the idea is to bring more diversity to startup ecosystem. So kind of I see parallels here in the way of thinking. Very interesting to know more about you, Pia. And then my next question will be then more about podcasting. So I have found yesterday I was at the pitches of our Spark Academy. They were pitching their business ideas, and I found that I think out of 23, two were actually podcast related business ideas. So it seems quite a topic. So a little bit more wanted to ask you about how can launching podcast can help you to grow your business. So basically through Castaway you have probably worked with that.
I have, yes. Um, so sort of maybe lifting a little bit about what makes Castaway Agency a little bit different from other similar services is that we focus extra much on the content itself. So we're firm believers in that the content and the quality are the ones that really help you boost your podcast. But what sort of companies can use a podcast for is actually a bunch of different things. One of them is customer engagement. So what we can do is sort of we draw parallels to thought leadership of different kinds, which has become increasingly popular in content creation on LinkedIn these past couple of this past couple of years really. So we can really draw parallels to that, and it's a different format. Um, However, it differs a little bit from traditional blog posts in a sense that it's actually it's a closer way to get in touch with your clients. It's more personal when they can hear your voice and you can interact with them sort of in a different way. Um, and then if we talk a little bit more about the content itself, the most important thing there is sort of value creation. So you have to see as a podcast, as a business, what type of value you actually want to create for your clients, um, and what sort of it does in the end. It creates a competitive advantage, right? Because you have a separate format to get in touch with your audience with when you do sort of use this storytelling ability to create a sort of brand community or network with your audience. So you're not only sort of providing information or thought leadership, but you're actually providing value. And how it differs from many traditional blog posts is that it doesn't necessarily have a focus on the actual product or service of the company. So it's not directly a marketing tool, but it's more of indirect marketing. So we do not recommend too much of, how would I say in English, productization in the podcast if it's a company podcast. Then the sort of other side of Castaway Agency is with influencers, and that is a little bit different. So the content there is, of course, important as well, but there we have more need and demand for sort of monetization and sponsorship acquisitions and things like that. So they differ a little bit.
Right. And I think that the podcasts have become like especially popular during the pandemic when people have had like limited contact with the outside world, and I think this is where they kind of spiked, and I think continuing to go strong. So definitely a channel to explore. Yes, but so more on this topic from like your experience from your clients. Have you seen what types of businesses are more likely to grow with podcasting? Like what areas?
That is actually a really good question, and I would say that um, it depends on the content quite a bit. So we haven't seen um, any certain type of businesses grow more than any other, but what we have seen is sort of the differences in the content that is created and how well that sort of interacts with the target audience and listeners. And the sort of biggest area, or sort of the biggest growing area, or how would I say, genre of podcast is entertainment podcast, which is uh, perhaps not surprising really. But that sort of can be a little bit tricky for certain businesses to sort of drive in with the entertainment part. But luckily, we have a bunch of different other genres that we can use as well. So after entertainment, we have news and current affairs, which is a lot more easier when it comes to sort of thought leaderships to stay afloat on different types of topics. Then, of course, we have relationships and family as well. So those are sort of the three biggest categories of interests when it comes to podcasts right now. In the past 2 years. Um, so in terms of your question, I would say perhaps that if you happen to have a business that deals with these type of matters in any way, then technically speaking, you might be more likely to have more weekly listeners with your podcast. But ultimately, it comes to the content that you provide and the quality of it as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think thought leadership is something many are seeking for, and yeah, even us, for example, one of our like pillars of what we do is thought leadership. So definitely sounds familiar. And then also I wanted to ask you, because probably you have a good overview of this, how popular is podcasting in Finland? And then also a little bit like our audience specific question is, are there many good podcasts in English that because our audience is mainly English speaking?
Yes, that is a good question. Podcasting in Finland is getting a lot more popular. It's growing really, really fast. Um, we're still a little bit behind when it comes to, for example, Sweden, where it's podcasting as itself is a lot more established. But it is increasing in Finland, definitely. Um, when it comes to the language of the podcast, our recommendation is to do it if possible, create your podcast in your mother tongue, or if you're bilingual, then either of your stronger languages. And this is because often you're more relaxed when you're speaking a language that you're really comfortable with. It decreases the amount of editing you have to do, decreases the amount of and different type of those sounds, and it just flows a lot more better. Um, there are a lot of good Finland-based podcasts in English, but of course that depends very much on sort of your interests. So what you are interested in. There also are a lot of really good podcasts based in Finland that are in Swedish. So for our Swedish speaking Finn community, which I am a part of as well, there are a lot of really good podcasts. But ultimately, it depends on sort of the content of your podcast and how you're doing your marketing efforts.
Mm. Yeah, and I think we need more podcasts in English, and I'm very happy to see, for example, in our community, some of those. But definitely hoping that this grows and we get more interesting podcasts also in English. Um, then I wanted to ask you, so like business wise, what are common mistakes that companies make when they decide to start or like add podcasting to their normal channels?
That is an excellent questions. Um, there are quite a few possible mistakes that you could be doing, as it always is when you sort of try out a new concept or try out doing something new. Um, and perhaps the biggest one is trying to do everything at once and trying to get into it too fast or doing everything by yourself if you're not, um, how would I say, if you're not comfortable with it. So just doing the thing because you think it's fun and cool and you want to experiment, and that's fine too. But what you have to do beforehand is to sort of check off the most important things. So I would really recommend hosting a type of workshop where you define your content. So create some sort of content pillar and define your target audience. Who am I really? Who do I really want to reach out to when I'm creating this podcast? Who am I talking to, and what is my desired outcome of that? Um, see really see what the sort of created value is. And also a part of sort of the personal branding in that aspect is to sort of find your why. So, why are you doing this? Why are you creating a podcast? If it's only and solely for your own pleasure, then that's fine. But now, when we're talking business wise, usually there is some sort of agenda behind that. So, it might be that you want to try out podcasting as a different sort of type of marketing effort. You might want to reach a whole new audience. Maybe you're launching a new product or a new service. But really, you need to sort of have that um, sort of set beforehand so that you know where you're taking this. And then when you have your why defined, then you have to sort of move on to the how. And for the how in this part, you need to sort of decide who is the most suitable person to be talking about this. So, who is going to be the podcast host? Are there going to be one or two? I do not typically recommend more hosts than three at a time. It can become really, um, the discussion often becomes a little bit intense and it can be tricky for the listener to follow, especially if you're planning on having guests. Um, but do decide that, of course, and then see that the person is prepped and well equipped to sort of do this task. And what I mean by that is, I really recommend a really quick tour or workshop or a lesson in rhetorics, because that is usually something that if you're an experienced speaker, you can really use that. And then another common mistakes is getting the cheapest equipment and sort of not diving into the quality of the podcast. So it really does make a difference what type of microphones you use in what environment you are, and then of course the brand of your company in your podcast and how you really seek to drive that forward. So there I do recommend to involve your marketing team to sort of see that your values and your brand is being communicated through your podcast as well, and so that it's coherent, it's consistent, it's structured. And maybe the final thing is sort of saving up too much on the editing. So it's a really big project. It's not easy, but if you're not familiar with how to edit and master your audio, then I really recommend hiring a professional do that, so that the audio comes out good quality, so that your listeners don't have trouble listening to it. And one thing also, what I really, really recommend, especially for podcasts that are starting out for the first time, is publishing frequently and keeping that systematically. And what I mean by that is you don't have to publish or put out a new podcast once a week. You can do it twice a week. You can do it even once a month. That might be a little on the sort of that's the scale, I would say, once a week or once a month and everything there between. But keep it structured so that you can tell your listener in the first episode that, hey, we will be publishing this podcast every second week, so they know what to expect. Because if you keep your listeners waiting for too long or keeping them in uncertainty, you're going to lose them.
Right. Consistency is key.
Yes.
Yes, very good tips, and I hope the podcasters in the audience have made their notes. And then I wanted to ask you like a little bit what you mentioned in the beginning of the answer to that question. So if you are doing a podcast for your own pleasure, so that's all also quite popular thing, I think, and then decide to make it into a business. How scalable is that? How possible is that? And what's the way with it? Do you
That is
have?
a good question. I would say it depends a little bit on the content of the podcast. So, what your podcast is about, how you've been doing it previously. It's a very, very big picture and a lot of moving parts to keep in mind. But the first question there is sort of if you've been doing it for your own pleasure, so that you've been publishing podcast episodes in a sense, um, sort of in comparison to blogging or writing a diary. Then it might need a little bit of editing, and I would really recommend that you yourself listen through all the episodes beforehand before you sort of publish them or do marketing efforts, so that you can find the red line there and eventually delete stuff if you don't want sort of the world to hear. But check your quality, check the sound quality, and check the mastering quality. So how well have you managed yourself to edit the podcast? Um, be clear that you know what the value is um, that you're publishing. So who are you trying to reach? Who are your key listeners? How is your target audience in that sense? And then think a little bit about the marketing part. So how is your sort of personal brand being communicated through your podcast, and how are you going to sort of monetize that? And if you're as a private person, you're planning on maybe perhaps creating a toiminimi or doing a small business on this, I would recommend beforehand to sort of define your core values for yourself and your podcast to follow when you seek for sponsorships, because you can get quite eager if your podcast starts growing and you get a lot of weekly listeners. You might get a little bit too eager and go and sort of tie sponsorship deals that are not in your favor. So really, really think about that. It is possible. It is possible.
Good news for those who started their own podcasts and are now thinking to scale them into a full grown business. Yes. So these are most of my questions on the podcasting side, and I remind the audience that we are still waiting for your questions in the chat. Please send them my way, and I will post them on the screen. I know that one of our channels, LinkedIn, started late broadcasting today, and sorry about that. And you can later you can rewatch the first few minutes. We will have the video available. But thank you for joining. And now I would like to ask Pipi a little bit more questions on the entrepreneurship side, because also like helping people open their business is like a big part of what we do and what our trainings are aimed at, and also it's a very inspiring work. And in this Spark Academy that we have now, it's aimed at female and non-binary people. So it's a kind of niche. And as you happen to be yourself, Pia, a female entrepreneur, I want to ask you a little bit about this, about your path. Do you think it is different? It is more difficult to be a female entrepreneur here in Finland? And what have been some of the challenges that you have been facing? Very interesting to hear your take.
Yes, thank you for that question. And of course, these are my sort of subjective experiences. So I can't speak for all the female entrepreneurs, and neither can I speak for those who identify as anything else. But some things that I noticed, especially at the start of our journey, was that we, in comparison in other accelerator programs we were within, Matilda and I had to explain ourselves a lot more. So we faced a lot more questions about, so what exactly is it that you even do? And a lot of questions about really silly stuff, really. So it was not easy getting that sort of recognition. So we had to sort of explain ourselves and defend our idea a lot more, or so it felt. Um, Other challenges, since we are not a product, we have not yet sort of been in, we have not been seeking funding in the same way. But what I do know from sort of the funding and then investment and financing side, through my research that I have been doing for my thesis, um, all female founding teams tend to get funding a lot less. Um,
Mm,
and we're talking about something between 5 to 7%,
mm,
and that in comparison to mixed teams and all male teams. So it is a challenge, and we still have a lot of things to sort of unveil here. Of course, then another thing is, for example, from personal experience, what I can tell is when I was representing Castaway agency at Slush this year, um, when I was approached by people, it was more often um, in the sense of asking me out or asking for my number or my Instagram account than to ask about what company I am representing, which is something that I hope will change in the future, because I am not attending Slush to look for a date. I'm attending Slush to look for potential partners. So that it was unfortunate, but something that throughout my research as well is something that unfortunately um, I've got confirmed by my research subjects as well. This is unfortunately happening, and I hope that we can be a part of that change instead, to sort of treat everyone and each other with the respect that we deserve.
yes, thank you very much for sharing, Pia. And yeah, I also hope there's more change to it. I was also at Slush, and I was attending several panels, and one of them was diversity in investors, I think, and they were talking about that question a lot. So hopefully we will see some good change in that direction. And I see some questions, so I will start putting them on. So Jade is asking, what platform would you recommend for hosting a podcast?
Thank you, Jade, for that question. Luckily, we do have these services where you just post the code to a podcast, and it publishes it automatically to all of the main services. So we have Spotify and Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, and all of the main sort of podcasting services. But if you're new to podcasting and you want to just try out sort of the practicalities, I can recommend, for example, Anchor. That's a nice one. So it's basically just to press record and then to do really simple edits. And by that I mean like just really cutting your podcast. And then if you're a little bit more sort of experienced, you've experimented a little bit with the sort of with the format itself, then you can, for example, try out, if you're a Mac owner, you can try out GarageBand. That's an easy tool to sort of, as a as an individual or private person, just try out the mastering bit a little bit.
Mhm. Thank you very much for the question and for the answer. And next up, we have Eva. So Eva is one of our Spark Academy members. So very happy to see that that Spark people are watching. She's asking, would Pia be able to advise if a podcast would search for funding / subsidies from the state organization? Is it better to be an association or toiminimi or OY?
Thank you for the question, and that is a good one. Actually, we did produce a podcast with Castaway agency about sustainability, and what we can do there is, it depends a lot on the topic and the target audience and the goals of the podcast. If you can search for governmental funding, or if you can search for um, funding from different types of nonprofit organizations that provide grants and stuff such. So it depends. But if you're just having a podcast, then usually you're searching for funding or grants through your private name. So for that, I would perhaps recommend an association. But it really depends on sort of what type of podcast you're having, and how you're sort of moving forward with that. But for the
Yes.
podcast itself, I would not start out with an OU, just because it's easier to try things out with the Dominimi. And what's good with the podcast is you don't have to turn it into a business straight away, but you still monetize it as a private person if you're invoicing, for example, through ukko.fi.
And one more question also from Eva. What are the best ways, based on Pia's experience, to monetize it?
Yes, thank you for your question. Um, Usually, what we recommend for before starting to look for ways to monetize your podcast is to have a monthly listener base of about 10,000 people. So after that, it can make sense to start looking for funding, or sorry, sponsorship acquisitions and deals, partnerships. It's not set in stone, but it helps you to provide a selling point for your podcast. So sort of letting the organizations and the companies, your possible partners, know that hey, this is actually worth your investment. So that's the first thing. Um, yes, that is, I would say, that is the most important thing. And then, like I mentioned earlier, really sort of checking into the partners you want to collaborate with. See that their values matches yours. See that you don't do partnerships with companies who do not match your values, because that can be really destructive for your podcast brand.
Yeah, that's a very good tip, and I think that's in general with investments.
Yes.
Like, get investments from those that you are like your values are aligned with. And thank you, Eva, very much for the questions. And please feel free. So Eva is with the Mastering Finland podcast, which is in English and is about mastering your life in Finland. So Eva, please feel free to share your podcast in the comments so that more of our community can hear. And also everyone who is here with their podcasts will be glad to see those who are you representing. Yes, waiting for a couple of more maybe questions. We're approaching the end of our live soon. And while we are waiting for those, I also wanted to ask Pia a little bit about one other aspect of what she's doing. And I know that Pia has been speaking a lot on topics of mental health. And this is another thing that is very close to our heart. And this is something we try to talk a lot about. So if you tell us a little bit, Pia, about that, like what are you advocating for or what are you talking about, would be very interesting also to hear.
Yes, that is a good question. I'm happy to answer. Um, so I host different types of workshops in how to deal with anxiety and how to sort of live with go on with your life, even though you might suffer from different type of mental health issues and disabilities or illnesses. Um, and it's for myself, it's been a really long journey. So I have always had to sort of deal with mental health problematics and different kinds of roadblocks. For myself, I suffer from general anxiety disorder and ADHD, for example, which are neurological things that affect my everyday life. Um, and why I sort of do this, why I host these workshops, is that I know how common these type of issues are, and I know how much damage they can do if you're not dealing with them, and if you're not using them sort of to, if you're not growing despite of them. So I host these workshops to give especially young people the tools that they might need. Of course, I'm not a mental health professional, but I'm sort of how was it one when I was doing a speaker gig on this, somebody described me as an experienced master or something like that. I thought that was quite funny. But I'm there sort of talking from experience and sharing stuff that have helped me and other sort of techniques I've learned through different forms of therapy and other sort of paths of self-learning. Um, so that is sort of how I ended up talking about that. Is what a really great passion of mine, and I really want to share with sort of the rest of the world how I overcame it, so that I can through that help other people suffering from the same things, and how it sort of correlates to my entrepreneurship path is, um, of course, it can be a little bit tricky. I can get really nervous and anxious when I have to face this sort of new situations. So it's definitely been a little bit challenging, but not at all, not at all impossible. Um, and this is also sort of I am proud to sort of help on with this path, um, for people with mental health struggling with their mental health, that you don't have to limit yourself. You can
Mm,
try out different things, and it doesn't matter if you fail, because it's,
mm,
at least you tried. So you have a lot more sort of potential of personal growth when you try things out than when you do not. So I really sort of want to get everyone away from that fear of failing, because at the end of the day, it's just your personal anxiety and your personal sort of goals and expectations that you put on yourself. So sometimes lowering your personal expectations can give you a boost.
Mm. Very important message, and thank you for sharing. We also talk a lot about emotional resilience. We have like some workshops about mindfulness and things like that, because part of our community are active job seekers that can get very frustrating. Important to be emotionally resilient, to keep trying. Part of our community is entrepreneurs. It can get very lonely, especially in the beginning. So also, I think a very, very important message for all of them out there from Pia. So thank you for that. And I will take one last question now. We have 5 minutes left. So again, from Eva. Eva wants to hear about your favorite podcasts in Finland in English. So already I asked before, but maybe if we can get some names.
That is an excellent question. Let me think about it for a little bit. Mm, that is a really good question. I know that I have some on my Spotify list, but I think I will have to get back to you regarding that. Um, right now, I am in this true crime bubble where I listen to a lot of true crime podcasts, and those I've found in Finland to mainly be in Finnish. I did find a couple in Swedish as well. But right now I'm sort of hooked on those. So I will have to get back to you regarding that. I have to check my list.
Yes. So thank you everyone for watching today. So Victoria, who is silently behind the scenes, will now share some shortcut links. Please follow us on social media. We are live every 2 weeks, and we tackle different topics that are important for our community here. So please stay tuned. And also, Pia, if you don't mind, I will recommend to follow also you on LinkedIn, so that people who are interested in the podcast topics can ask maybe more questions from you, or just follow your journey. And also, I will share some of Castaway and Pippi's LinkedIn in the chat, and also in post-production we send email to everyone who's registered, so you will also get those there. Thank you very much for joining. And if you missed the beginning, you can rewatch this, or just if you want to watch it again, you can rewatch this on all of our channels. Thank you, Pippi. Please get better. I know that Pippi is with the flu. Yeah, and hope the spring gets warmer after Vappu finally. Yes.
Yes, let's hope that. Thank you so much. It was nice being
Yes.
here.
Thank you, everyone. Have a nice day.
Have a nice day. Bye.